Welcome to Smart CP webinars. Today is the first talk on thinking smart in the management of cerebral palsy. I call it also as winning tips on treating cerebral palsy.
Uh, so basically, yesterday we started with this presentation saying that this is how a small activity starts and grows big. So this is a Hutman clinic started in 1948 by Society of Rehabilitation for Crippled Children. Grew into a hospital in 2 years' time, where you can see a lot of wheelchairs. And this was the hospital in Bombay at Haji Ali, which was mainly treating polio. And a lot of people who had polio and disabilities have been treated here. A lot of my friends, orthopedic surgeons who have polio, I know, have taken the treatment there. And NX building came in 1965. In 1962, the first CP clinic was started here. And today this hospital is a big hospital. It has become SRCC Children Hospital where I work. And this along with at Jupiter CP Center, I do most of my work. And we are actively involved in research and training and teaching apart from just seeing patient and operating them. So it all came from Dr. P.K. Mullah Firoz, who is known as actually father of cerebral palsy in India. Father because people would say that she was really a iron lady, and her birthday is 3rd October, which we celebrate as National Cerebral Palsy Day. And these are some of the things which she said so important. And the topmost being simple, trying to do things with your own hands and improvise. And nowadays, in COVID times when Sanket, we have to do our own housework, cook food, do the cleaning, doing things with your own hands. This is absolutely true.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
improvise. You have to improvise every day. Yeah, here's Sanket.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's absolutely true, right? So with this, we go ahead with today's presentation, and I'm going to go point by point. No, it's 5:08, and at 5:30, whichever slide we come to, we will stop the presentation and take question answer. And remaining part of the talk, will continue in the next session. So we are going to have these sessions once a week, and they're going to continue. We are also going to include a lot of guest talks. We are going to include case discussions. So people, this I'll make announcement at end of the talk today, right? So the
Right.
first point which we discussed yesterday also is that CP should not be treated like polio. There are a lot of people, especially orthopedic surgeons, they started treating CP like polio because the CP surgeons evolved from a polio surgeon. People who were doing polio surgery started treating CP. And they said it's all same. Polio has knee flexion deformity, CP has knee flexion deformity. Let's treat both same ways. Because they had excellent results from treating polio. See, polio had equinus, CP had equinus. Let's treat it in the same way, but it doesn't work. So the first thing what we learned is cricket is not like baseball. Both are different. Both look similar, but the way you treat or play cricket, you cannot play baseball. Similarly, the way you treat polio, you cannot treat CP. CP and polio, what's the difference? Polio is no motor neuron problem, CP is ocumotor neuron. Polio has only motor affection. CP now we know as sensory plus motor affection. Though the definition says it's a non-progressive motor disorder, there are a lot of sensory inputs which are affected in cerebral palsy which cannot be ignored. And we know that polio, the higher centers, vision, hearing is normal. In CP can come with extra baggages. Some of the CP children will have vision problems, some will have hearing issues, some will have behavioral issues, some will have cognitive problems, some will have intelligence issues. So, it comes with its own baggage, and which also needs to be treated and looked after. So this point when extrapolated, these are two real life cases I want to discuss. The child on the left was being treated as a known case of cerebral palsy. It was written on his spine, known case of cerebral palsy, treated by therapists, by rehab people for a long, long time. And this child, when he was admitted at Jupiter Hospital for fever, I was sent a call. I saw the child, very intelligent child, playing with the computers, but he had restriction of neck movements. And this child, we got MRI done, and this actually turned out to be a craniovertebral problem, which And this child actually required urgent surgery to decompress his cervical spine than doing his surgery for his limbs. Okay, so it's important that in a child with spasticity, look at other causes. Don't label them as CP. If you see this other child, she is walking like this with spasticity, and her on inquiry we found that her sister also had similar problem. Again, being treated as a known case of CP. But when we did her genetic test and we took a neurology opinion, we knew that she had something which is known as hereditary spastic paraparesis, and she did very well initially with antispastic medications and then some very minor surgery. So, so, so you have to be sure what you are treating is CP. That's the first rule. Second issue is that to realize that the orthopedic issues in cerebral palsy and contractures, so-called contractures, which we see are not actually contracted muscle. Muscle doesn't shorten in CP. What really happens is when we see deformities like this, what is actually happening is that muscles are not shortening. They are not elongating as much as the bone. And this is very important to realize for two reasons. That if we can avoid muscle shortening or we allow the muscle to lengthen as the child grows, we will prevent contractions. Second thing, it's important to remember that whichever is the period of bone growth, it also corresponds to period of muscle shortening. It's important to realize that a child grows fast between 1 to 3 years. So this is a period where child is still going, they have only spasticity, you don't see much of contraction. But in the second growth spurt, which takes place in girls after 8 years and in boys after 9 years, you will see maximum contraction. Now, this is also a time where parents skip therapy. The parents have schools, education, they are getting older. And many of them will stop therapy, and that's a combined reason effect of stopping therapy, growth, gravity, which gives rise to contracture, which are so difficult to treat later on. So if the femur increases, but the tibia, but the hamstring remains short, then you will have knee flexion contracture. So it's not a flexion contracture, it is failure of hamstring to lengthen as much as femur. And it's very important. That's why when we see CP, though the definition is CP is a non-progressive disorder, there is a continuous evolvement of the disease. Okay, it keeps on evolving, it keeps on changing. The entire dynamics of the child changes because his weight is being added on. And this is important to realize. If the height increases by 2 times, the weight of the child increases 8 times. This is important to realize. So you are not working. So if the child is 4 years old and if his height is 1 x, at maturity the height will be 2x, but the weight will be 8x. This is something which you have to realize. There is a difference between length and volume. And the muscle forces don't have to work against length, they have to work against volume. Okay, so these are important physics principles we realize. The liver arm changes as length, but the effort and the load, the forces, they change as per the volume. So these are important thing to realize. So if you see a child, this is a child who is 3-year-old, he's walking on toes. He's walking on toes because his muscles are spastic. When I say muscles are spastic, they have normal length, which also means that why the child is walking on toes, because there is a hyper sensitive reflex arm, which as soon as we stretch, the child comes on toes. So why does it matter? It matters because at this age, if you're going to rapidly stretch the muscle, the response of the muscle will be opposite, equal and opposite. You stretch the child is going to stretch you. So vigorous stretching therapy must be avoided at this age. It's important to relax the child, okay, not have him agitated. Reduce his mental activity. The overall electrical activity in the brain has to be reduced. You need to use antispastic drugs in the right doses and the right form with consultation of the neurologist so that this child can be controlled well. Braces should be used, but any brace which is going to overcorrect should not be used. You don't want to overstretch, otherwise the child will have a lot of pain. Okay, so this is the age where you want to control spasticity. If child has focal spasticity, which is coming in way of his walking, what we really need to do at this age is to control that focal spasticity with focal medications like Botox injection or alcohol injections or phenol injection. But if there is generalized spasticity, it's important we use the right drug. If there is more component of dystonia, we use nowadays drugs like gabapentin and antidystonic drugs. But if the main problem is spasticity, then we use antispastic drugs. So entire management of child at this stage is different. But if you see a child like that, it's a 6-year-old child walking on toes. Here there is hardly any spasticity, but actually the child has what is known as contracture. And this contracture is not because of shortened muscle, it is because his tibia has increased in length, but calf has not increased in length to the same aspect. And it's very important to realize that calf has two muscles, gastrocnemius and soleus. And in diplegic CPs, gastroc is going to be tight, but soleus will continue to increase in length because both are different muscles. This is a jumping gait, and this is resulting from tightness of hamstring and calf muscles in this child. And at this stage, the effort should be to increase the muscle length. This is by stretching, this is by active exercises, like making him to do active um, therapy like squats, using antagonist muscles so as to actually improve the length. You can use cold packs, you can use splints here to increase the muscle length. And when nothing works, we do a surgery to lengthen the muscle, not 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 the tendons. The muscles have to be lengthened, and muscles have to be lengthened at the aponeurotic level. I have put some questions in today's WhatsApp. For those who have not seen, it's important to realize that a muscle which is a shortened muscle is a weaker muscle. Muscles have fibers. When the muscle gets shortened, these fibers go perpendicular to the bone. So when the muscle contracts, what actually is happening is the bone is coming near to the muscle, but actually no action is happening at the joint. When we do an aponeurotic release, what happens in this child is actually the muscle is going to change its course, become parallel to the bone. And now when the muscle contracts, actually it's going to make a action at the joint. So it's important to realize that gastrocnemius fibers are horizontal when it's spastic. When you do aponeurotic release, these fibers become more vertical and they are able to act in vertical fashion. That's why a muscle lengthening surgery is not just about changing the arc of movement, it is also about changing the spinate angle. And we'll see these more and more examples as we go through certain cases as time to come. Now, this is the third stage where I'm showing the video. And at this stage, what is actually happening is child is walking on toes, but he's also walking with a lot of external rotation. His knee is flexed, the femur is internally rotated, tibia is externally rotated. So there is a lot more baggage being added to his original condition. The entire inability to walk this time is because of a liver arm problem. It is not because of muscle contraction. And it will be wrong to do a muscle lengthening surgery at this stage. It is important to correct the livers, and this we do by doing derotation osteotomies, by angulation correction osteotomies, and we also do this by doing muscle shortening surgery to increase their performance. So now we've seen that the same child has spastic diplegia, same disease, same MRI, same brain, but at three different stages, the cause of his not walking normally is different. And these three stages are primary stage where we have spasticity and our aim is to control spasticity. Secondary stage where there is so-called muscle shortening and our aim here is to restore the muscle length. And a tertiary stage where we have bone and joint deformities. And our aim here is to actually control the muscle, correct the liver arm, in these patients. Okay. So, the journey till now, is it all right for everybody?
Yeah,
Sanket,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
if anyone has question, I'm just going to stop for a sip of tea, but people can raise their hands and ask questions. And if there are no questions, then I can go on. Those who have questions, just unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can make a comment. All right. So I think things are going all right, and I can proceed to the next slide now. Okay. So how do we know? This is known to everybody, but I'm still going to spend some time at this slide. How do you know that which stage you are in? Are you in primary stage, secondary stage, or tertiary stage? What test do you do? How do you know uh, or judge what is happening? So this is known as Tardu scale, and I'm going to show you in the child, which was the first child, which had spasticity, what is happening to the Tardu scale. This is a fast stretch which stops at 30-degree equinus, and then we slowly stretch, and the ankle goes to 20-degree dorsiflexion. Okay. So what is happening? I'll put this again. This video. This child, I am doing fast stretch, and it stops at 30-degree equinus. And when you slowly stretch, it goes to 20-degree dorsiflexion. So we have two values. One is known as fast stretch, which is R1, and a slow stretch, which is R2. R1 is 30-degree equinus, R2 is 20-degree dorsiflexion. So we get R1 minus R2. The difference between the two here is 30 minus 20, which is 50. So the spasticity interval is 50, and child does not have any shortening because his R2 actually goes in dorsiflexion. So from R1 and R2, these values per se are not important. What is important, what you deduce from. So the difference between R1 and R2 is important, and the value R2 is important. R1 and R2 difference tells you what is the amount of spasticity. R2 tells you what is the amount of shortening. So it clearly shows us in this case, what this child has is pure spasticity. There is no shortening. So one should not do lengthening for this child. One should not overstretch this child muscle. What we want to do is to actually control spasticity, which was done initially with therapy and splint, but because the child did not respond, this will be a good child to try botulinum toxin in his calf muscle.
Sir, can I ask a question?
Please ask question.
Sir, the spasticity difference that you mentioned, so how much should it be that you say that Botox can work?
Yeah, minimum 30 degrees interval. Less than that, it's not worth doing an injection. Less than that, the arc is too narrow to make any difference.
Okay.
Okay.
And
So these are rough rules. Yeah,
and
these are rules of thumb.
how much difference is where you don't do Botox and you have to do a release?
Yeah. So any child who has contraction. So for ankle, I would say that if I'm not able to go to neutral, if there is 10-degree or 20-degree equinus, then that's a chance to intervene. Now for a 10 or 20-degree equinus, you don't need a surgery. You can try a stretch plaster. But if equinus is more than 20, or it's causing secondary problems, like if it's causing recurvator, if it's causing midfoot break, then you would intervene early. Or if it has to be again rule of 30, 30-degree contraction. Coming to hamstring, I will come to hamstring now and then show you. This is the first child where I'm showing R1 and R2. Now, in this, if you see, this is the fast stretch happening at 40, and slow stretch, you are able to completely extend the knee. Okay, so I'm also going to show you fallacies of the tests. When we are testing popliteal angle, what's important is the other knee should be fully extended and the hip should be fully extended. In this video, what is happening, if you see, purposely we have shot it this way, but I'm going to show this video again. The other foot, other knee and other hip is not stabilized, and it gives a false result. It's important the other hip and knee are stabilized. But in this patient, if you see, again, roughly, R1 is 40 degrees, R2 is 0. The spasticity interval is 40 and shortening is 0. So again, this child does not qualify for surgery. He qualifies for controlling hamstring spasticity if the therapist feels that this spasticity is coming in way of his rehab. Now, what were the problems with this child? When we were seeing video of this child had very short steps. Okay, and his pelvis was turning behind. So if you feel that the child's swing phase is being affected by hamstring, then you can do Botox for hamstring in this child. Now, it's important to realize in CP, as Paulo Urban in his webinar recently mentioned, giving a good stance phase is necessity. It is a duty. It is minimum requirement. But the swing phase is a luxury. So if you have to choose between improvement in stance phase and swing phase, you will choose a stance phase. Now, when a child with hamstring tightness is able to keep the knee straight in mid stance phase, but has excessive knee flexion in the swing phase, you can ignore that hamstring tightness. You don't have to release it, because if you release a hamstring which is not affecting the stance phase, what will happen is you will lose the hip control, which is provided by that hamstring. So when we plan any intervention, it is important that we look at how much is the amount of spasticity, how much is the amount of shortening, but we also look at what is the effect of that spasticity or shortening on the gait of the child or function of the child. Anything which will not change the function or will not change the stance phase, you have to think twice before doing it. Okay, so there are small little points which we are coming to. So this patient, I would do Botox in the hamstring because it was affecting further progression of a child for active participation. Now, if this is the second child's video we saw, the one in the middle, and I'm showing his Tardu scale, and here fast stretch comes at 50, and slow stretch, when you slowly stretch, it comes at 40. So the spasticity interval is 10. It's not that there is no spasticity, but it's not significant to treat that. But what is significant is shortening of hands. And in this child who is 6-year-old, if you don't restore hamstring length, because in the stance phase, he's walking with a knee flexion which is more than 30 degrees. This will go for a progressive knee flexion. What is going to happen is, in order to maintain the balance, child will flex the knee further. The hamstring will not stretch, which is supposed to stretch as we stand. It will not stretch, and hamstring will remain short. It will not lengthen as the child increases in height. And because of this, what is going to happen is this child will land up with a crouch gait. So the common, the modern principles of crouch surveillance say that moment you discover a hamstring shortening, which is significant, it is important to stretch that hamstring either with therapy, with stretch plasters, with splints, or when nothing works, you will have to do a very judicious hamstring aponeurotic lengthening. And when you do hamstring lengthening in this patient, you should spare lateral hamstring. That is the first principle. Nowadays, a lot of people spare even semimembranosus. Don't release it. Take care of only semitendinosus. And when you are treating semitendinosus, either do a fractional lengthening, don't do a Z lengthening, or better even transfer semitendinosus to femur so that the hip extensor power of semitendinosus maintain. So hamstring conservation is mantra of the day. It's very important. And as Paulo Serber, told us in the webinar that day, which is very important, I'm going to repeat it twice, this sentence, and I'm going to put it up on the WhatsApp group also. If you feel that a muscle needs lengthening, if the muscle actually needs lengthening, but if you don't lengthen, it's all right. But if the muscle did not require lengthening, and if you end up lengthening it, then that's a crime. I'm going to repeat it again. And if the muscle did require lengthening, and if you didn't do it, you waited, that's not a problem. But a muscle which did not require lengthening, if you end up lengthening it, then it's a crime. Okay. So we are coming quickly to the third situation now, where this is a child who's walking with a crouch gait. Here R1 and R2 both are 50, which means R1 minus R2, which is the spasticity interval, is 0. Is there hamstring shortening? Yes, there is hamstring shortening. So Sanket, what will you suggest? If you were treating this child and then you sent to me for opinion, and I said, Sanket, there seems to be a shortening of hamstring because R1 and R2, these are the values.
Right. So clearly the spasticity element isn't there. It's a contracture.
Right.
So of course there needs to be some orthopedic intervention.
So would you do injection of Botox or muscle length? What would you?
I think it would be muscle lengthening.
So here again, I want to, you know, ask everyone through show of hands. We will also have uh, opinion polls from next time onwards. We are going to add more and more things as these go on. Those who feel that Botox or plaster is the right thing to do at this stage, just raise your hand. You can go to more and raise your hands, and I will come to know how many people have raised their hands. Yeah. So from the participant, raise your hand. Those who feel that Botox will work. Okay. Now what you can do is drop your hands now. And people who feel that hamstring lengthening should be done, raise your hand. There are 64, so you know the total should become 64. Okay. So there are some people, yeah, around 12 who feel uh, hamstring should be lengthened. Is there anyone who has any other opinion? Just raise your hand. So you drop your hands now. So we got sort of what is the audience feel? Yeah, some people have raised their hands. So unmute your audio and come in front. Uh,
I am also trying the raise your hands thing. So
and tell us if anyone wants to come out and say, anyone wants to come live and say, or you can put it on the chat box, or also
Maybe PMFR, Dr. Taral, maybe PMFR.
lengthening. Yeah? Kanan is saying
Yeah.
lengthening, some sort of lengthening should be done. All right.
PMFR, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else?
depending on the age of the child, release or bony surgery.
So what is important in this child? We are seeing this child with hip inflection, which stretches the hamstring. You know, so hamstring is put to a stress test, and then I'm checking what is happening to the knee. Now this same child, I'm going to put another picture. This is with hip in extension, and within hip in extension, I am not able to straighten the knee. And when we take X-ray of the child, you realize few things on the X-ray, that there is a fixed flexion contracture of the knee of 30 degrees. You will also notice, Kanan, you can see that patella is high riding. Can you all see? So I'm going to draw this and show. So you can see this is the level of patella, and that's the level of the knee. So patella is really high riding, and this means that this child doesn't have just muscle contraction. Out of this 50 degrees, 30 degrees is contributed by joint contraction, which is a liver arm problem. There is also patella alta, which makes quadriceps inefficient. And in this case, lengthening hamstring may not work that well because it will not correct the knee. Okay. Now, what should be done in cases like this? One of the options in these cases, is, as Kanan suggested, you can very judiciously lengthen hamstring and do plaster for the knee, so that you have access to the knee joint once the hamstring is released, and you can stretch the knee joint and make it fully extend. Right, that's one of the options. There's some disturbance. I would request those who have their mic on to just mute it. So one of the options, again I'll repeat, is to do hamstring judicious lengthening, because this is like 7 walls of Mahabharata. Once you pierce the outer wall, you have access to the inner wall. So the moment you lengthen hamstring, you have access to the knee joint, and that you can stretch. Another option is to lengthen hamstring and modulation. There is somebody whose mic is on, so I would just request. I can tell. I think it's disturbing people. I think Android, Blue Droid. Somebody will just ask them to mute. So, we can do growth modulation by stopping growth in front of the knee, so that gradually knee can correct. And third option is to do a surgery where we cut the femur, we shorten the femur. When we shorten the femur, the tightness in the hamstring will be taken care automatically. When we shorten the femur, it also allows us to correct the knee uniformity at femoral level to make the knee straight, so that when the child stands, the center of gravity now can go to center of the knee, which was actually going behind the knee. Okay, so now we understand that when you have tests, only tardive scale is not important. It's also important to look at joint control. It's important to look at tibial rotations. It's important to look at the feet. It's important to look at femoral anteversion. Because only when you combine all this information, you get right access to reason while the child is walking with the knee bend. Okay, so we have a vicious cycle here. Increased muscle tone gives rise to muscle contracture, that gives rise to liver arm problem. When you have liver arm problem, that again affects the muscles, that again affects the muscle performance, that again affects the liver arm, and this goes on continuing. And somewhere we need to break this cycle. So I just want to end sort of today's talk by summarizing that there is spasticity in CP, shortening in CP, and liver arm problem in CP. And it's important that, though we are drawing parallel between cricket and CP, in cricket there are 3 stumps. Whichever stump you hit, the batsman is out. CP rules are different. If there is spasticity, you will control that. If there is shortening, you will control that. If there is a liver arm problem, you will control it. There are times where children have combinations, spasticity and shortening combination. You have to treat them. Many times we use combination of Botox with myofascial. There will be combination of shortening and liver arm problem. You have to tackle. And sometimes there will be muscle weakness with a liver arm problem, and you have to tackle. Okay. With this,
दूध के नहीं पिएंगे
to end my presentation here. With these 3 important points, I'm going to share these slides again on the WhatsApp group. And those who have questions now, can come alive and then ask us questions.